Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Idol Podcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read Passing by Nella Larsen. Released in 1929, this is set in the 1920s of New York, and it is a tale of racial passing, affording our main characters, Clare Kendry and Irene Redfield, two very different lives. Nella Larsen is an author with a very unique, I would say, life, because at one point she did stop writing and she went back into her trade, which was nursing. And this is all explained in the most recent editions. The cover that I have is actually the film adaptation cover, and it was released in 2021. But the introduction with a lot of the background information on Nella Larsen was published in 2018. So anything post 2018 should give you a good amount of information on Larsen as an author, but as well as her personal life. Now, in addition to Passing, she released Quicksand in 1928 and various other short stories. She is, like other Black creatives during this time period, associated with the Harlem Renaissance era. Now, before we get into breaking this book down, I first want to discuss what passing means in terms of this book. So passing is the ability to present as a different racial group. So for a lot of Black Americans during this time, and even if you take it all the way back to when they were enslaved, this means passing over the color line. So if you were someone who had lighter skin or European features that resulted from interracial relations, you're someone who has the ability to present as white and to literally access forbidden places and spaces to Black people. So we get the question, okay, why do people choose to pass? Well, again, they have that ability to shop at different places or buy housing and property in different areas. But what we find in this piece is that for some that choose to do it for life, this means excommunicating yourself from the Black community. And so why would someone do that? Well, according to one of our characters, Brian Redfield, it's the instinct of the race to survive and expand, which makes a lot of sense because when we're talking about Black people in the 1920s, we're talking pre-civil rights era, way before. And really what we're looking at here is Jim Crow era. And so a lot of Black people are in survival mode. And so logically speaking, if you have the ability to pass as a white person, do it, for the sake of the kids that you'll reproduce, but also to afford them maybe a better life by, again, accessing, different levels of education or housing. Okay, so let's talk about the structure. There is that introduction that I was talking about that was published in 2018 by Professor Emily Bernard. She is someone who is very well established in American studies and literature. I would say this is more than an introduction, and it's actually an analysis of passing. A lot of the questions that I ask when reading a book to review, she kind of went over a lot of those topics. And so I don't want to call it an introduction. I think it's a lot more than that. But, there's a lot of good stuff in it. In fact, my only critique was that I felt like I was exposed to a little too much of the character analysis of our characters, prior to actually reading it. But I'm one of those people that I either really want to know everything before I read the book or I don't want to know anything. And so it was nice, though, to get that background information because, in addition to looking at the content, she really broke down what it meant to pass at that time, what era we're looking at, as well as Nella Larsen herself. Now, there are 3 parts. They are titled Encounter, Re-encounter, and Finale. And this is all words referring to the relationship of Clare and Irene. And there are 4 chapters within each of those parts. And lastly, we end with the explanatory notes by Thaddeus M. Davis, which was super helpful. And he published that portion of the book in 1997. So any edition published after that should have the explanatory notes in it. And essentially, it kind of worked just as like footnotes. If there was a phrase that maybe is outdated or we haven't used it in a while, or even referencing, certain court cases, he would, just write a paragraph or 2 in the back of the book, and it would give you more context. It's not necessary to get through the plot, but if you're someone like me who always loves learning new information, it was very nice. So if you do get an edition like mine, I would suggest bookmarking that page. I had like a sticky note there the whole time, just so I could switch back and forth when necessary. And there weren't a lot. There was maybe like 6, I would say like 6 per chapter, but there was one chapter where there was only 1, so it's not necessary, but it definitely was helpful to the reader. Now, this book is presented to us in third-person narration, and we're following mainly Irene. So what that means is we see a lot of, when referencing characters, she did this, or he did that, or she feels this way. So there's not a lot of I unless it's dialogue from the character themselves, or if they're thinking it. Okay, so for the character arcs, I really am just going to discuss Irene Redfield and Clare Kendry because those are, honestly, they're kind of the only 2 characters that matter. Not that the other characters don't, but it's their relationship that makes up the story of passing. Now, both of these characters have mixed race backgrounds and light skin. So on the surface, they are the same, meaning they both have that ability to pass for white. However, they've chosen 2 different ways to react to this. So Irene Redfield is someone who is an example to housewives everywhere. Her home is in order. She volunteers with all of these organizations, including the Negro Welfare League, which, according to the introduction, I believe, it was modeled after the Urban League, which was real, but the Negro Welfare League is fictionalized. And she's the type of nice that when confronted by Claire's life, she was basically bulldozed into gatekeeping Claire's secret. So Claire actively chooses to pass as white for life. That's it. Whereas Irene does not. So it's a little unfair to Irene because she herself, although she has the ability to pass for white, she really doesn't do it intentionally. I would say probably more so for convenience. If people don't question her, which they don't, then she'll just, keep it moving. But she has never denied her blackness. So it's really rich of Claire to just throw that responsibility onto Irene when it's something that she doesn't even take on for herself. Now, Irene's motivation is really just to protect her status quo, her family, her home, and her activities outside the home, her community organizing and volunteering and things like that. She just wants that, and that's it. In relation to her blackness, again, she lives within the Black community, Harlem. She still has Black friends. She does have white friends as well, but the point is that she's not ostracizing herself. She goes out to these events. She hangs out with the people that are friendly to her, and that's it. Never denying her blackness, though. Clare Kendry, on the other hand, She's shaded as selfish, mainly by Irene and her remembering, the different events that happened when they were children, but as well as the conversations that they have presently. I would say I'm going to shade her as emotionally manipulative, and this is just through her interactions with people. I think that she is aware that she has a charm about her and she uses it wisely. And when she sees that situations are not going the way that she wants them to go, she readjusts her attitude in order to point it in that direction. I think the main example I'm thinking of right now is when her and Irene were having a conversation about something. I think it was going to the dance, and Irene said she didn't really want her to go. It wasn't smart. And Claire starts crying. And it's like, this is someone who is wealthy. She has a husband, a white husband. She passes as white. She has money. She has access to a lot of things that the people at that dance don't. So why is she crying over the dance? Because it's not about the dance. It's about her fulfilling, her own selfishness, basically. So, and then also her yearning to be with her own people. I really think that that's her being bored with the castle that she built around herself. She chose to position herself completely away from the Black community. And I think now that she just kind of wants something different. She wants a little spice. But it's wrong of her to use that against Irene. Like, oh, I miss my people, poor me, I can't tell people I have Black friends. And it was a choice though, Of course, there are consequences that come along with that choice, but she chose to pass for white and she knew what she was giving up. So she's motivated, well, by her definition, probably would be to experience Black people again. Really what it is a self-serving ambition. Always, always. All of her decisions are made to fulfill herself. I pulled this quote from the book. Claire still retained her ability to secure the thing that she wanted in the face of opposition and utter disregard of the convenience and desire of others. Which, she acknowledges that she's kind of a selfish person too. But that sounds a lot like Sula, which is the novel written by Toni Morrison. In a way, both characters, meaning Claire and Sula, they're not malicious intentionally, but they acknowledge that they're doing what they can so that they can be happy or they can get what they want or they can be comfortable. And that's it. It's not about everyone else. It's about them. Now, when it comes to Claire's relation to Blackness, she severed the ties with the Black community in order to pass full time. And per Irene, Claire cared nothing for the race. She only belonged to it. Okay, theme time. So the first one, obviously, is race presentation. So there is an incentive to pass white. So you get a higher status. And this could be, we're not talking like the British monarchy status, but people treat you differently when they believe that you are white. If it's just pleasantries on the street, or again, if it's access to those stores and social circles and property that we were talking about. And if you need a definite example, one would be redlining and the fact that certain communities didn't allow Black people to move in. So this was an incentive to Black people that could pass for white, men or women. This is something that they could access that they couldn't if they were Black. Now, what are the rules to passing? Well, per Irene, it's not definite or tangible, and it's not. It really varies by person and audience. If someone can tell that you're Black, then you can't pass. But if someone cannot tell that you're Black and they think you're white, then you can pass. It really varies, though. Irene only placed Claire as her old friend by her laugh, and this reinforces how racially ambiguous her features were. The only thing I could think of that is slightly comparable is the brown paper bag test. And this is when a brown paper bag was literally held up to a black person, and if you were lighter than that paper bag, then you got access to whatever club or circle or just better treatment in general. And also, I want to note that this was used in both white and black circles. So keep that in mind. That's not something that's just a product of white supremacy. So basically, the conclusion to this is that besides pigment and features, people that fall within this group of being able to pass can choose to adopt certain mannerisms and live and act out however they want until they die. You know, and this is a part of a larger conversation of race in general, because really how do you tack that down? You know, how can you tell if this person should identify as black or white if they have like black and white blood in them? So this is a part of a larger conversation, but it's something that back then it was strictly looked at as, are you black or are you white? And if you look white, boom, you got it, go for it. Resentment is a reoccurring theme. In the marriage to Irene and Brian, we see an interesting approach to the racial violence in the US. Brian is discontented at staying in the US and remaining a doctor because he wanted to take his family to Brazil to escape, you know, that all of these aggressions and microaggressions that he went through, that his wife goes through, that he knew the kids were going to go through. And Irene, you know, stopped that right there because, again, she's protecting her status quo. And so by her standing up to him, he kind of sees it as a betrayal, and he's reminded every day of the consequences of that decision because, again, you know, all of the racial insensitivities as well as the more dangerous aspects, including lynchings, are being broadcast, and you hear about them, you even see them, you experience them sometimes. And so he is very at a strange place in his marriage. He's very resentful towards his wife, but you can tell they still love each other. And Irene, on the other hand, resents his inability to be so with things as they are. Again, this whole status quo. She wants Brian to be happy and she wants the family to be happy, but it has to coincide with the way that things are right now. When we talk resentful friendships, Irene and Claire are perfect. Again, Irene's disgust with Claire's choice of husband. For background, Claire, a woman who is both black and white but chooses to pass white, married the most outright hateful, racist person she could find. This man does not like black people, and every other word out of his mouth confirms it. And Claire purposely put Irene in line of that humiliation by knowing her husband's sentiments, but insisting that Irene stay to meet him. But then she goes a step further by fanning the flames and pushing him to explain the nickname that he has for her, which is Nig. I mean, that whole scene was a mess. And in the film, it was equally a mess in a good way. Well, this is not a good situation, but I think that they did that scene well because it shows the level of crazy going on in Claire's head, because she knows she's black. Her husband does not. And this whole strange nickname that he has for her, Nig, and he hates black people, and it's just a lot. But it all boils down to this. Claire's the only person in this situation that knows everything, okay? And she's pulling Irene in to play this game that Irene really shouldn't be in this position to play. She's just minding her business. Claire's a nut. I'm sorry. There's something off with her. Anyway, okay, when we talk about resentment within self, so Claire, I guess you could give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she resents her decision to pass for life. And this could be the motivation for her to infiltrate Irene's life, to get that reconnection with her Black roots. But again, she could put a stop to all of this by just coming out and telling her husband, which is the biggest obstacle for her to live the way she currently wants to live. Just tell him the truth and be done with it. Now, I listed Irene under here because I wanted to explicitly say I don't think that she resents holding Brian back and holding the family back from moving to Brazil because, again, she's protecting, what she knows. But she still, loves the family and she wants what's best for them. But she's decided that they are going to find their happiness within the Jim Crow system, within everything that's happening around them. And this leads us to safety, the last theme here. Each character is really just searching for their safe place, except for Claire, who is arguably in the most dangerous position in the book and doesn't really seem to acknowledge any of it. So Brian wants to shelter his kids from the racial violence by moving to Brazil. In his mind, that is the safe place. And there's an irony in here because Brian and Irene have an argument because Irene doesn't want to discuss, things like lynchings in the house in front of the children at dinner. She doesn't want to talk about the microaggressions that the kids may be experiencing. She just wants it to... What does she want it to do? Now, this is a good point because I don't know what she expects to happen, though, because they are in Harlem and they are in the 1920s in racist America. And so I'm not sure, not saying that moving to Brazil would provide them with, a very peaceful lifestyle, but you can't have it both ways. And so there's an irony in that because Brian looks down on Irene for not wanting to discuss lynchings. He's like, okay, well, we need to move to Brazil. But she wants to stay and doesn't want to talk. I don't know. It's an interesting impasse that they're both at. And it's difficult because it's not just them, it's their children that it's affecting now. And more importantly, it's Black children or Black boys. They have 2 boys, so. And lastly, Irene, her safe place is simply anywhere away from Claire, and she just can't seem to get rid of her, unfortunately. So I have one motif before we get into the film review and the book review. So there's this level of sensuality, which there's like this yearning between Irene and Claire, and it's a callback to all of the conversations held on the sexuality of both characters. And being that this book has been out for almost 100 years, people have been discussing this for a while. I do think that the film went a step further and visualized some of that. But it does, at the end of the day, enforce the undeniable charm of Clare Kendry. So whether that was an aspect of each character and their personality in their lives, or it was just a plot point to reinforce, Claire is hard to stay away from. Either way, there's still something like, it's not, I would say sensuality is the best way to describe it because it's not really lust. It's kind of like it's not really love either. It's a strange yearning that the two of them have for each other. So the film is on Netflix and it was released this year, and it stars Ruth Negga as Claire, Tessa Thompson as Irene, Alexander Skarsgård as John, and Andre Holland as Brian. The film is short, the book is short, so it's about an hour and a half, and it is viewed in black and white. It has a reoccurring reoccurring motif of jazz music, and that's kind of like a nod to the Harlem Renaissance. I will say it's very reminiscent of a lot of Spike Lee projects, and that's a good thing. Like, it kept reminding me of Spike Lee. If you've seen any of his stuff, released in the 90s, what did it really remind me of? I think there was a bunch of Spike Lee projects that kind of like came together in my mind, but it was really good. I think probably because it's, they filmed it in Harlem, and so I would say that the film is very true to source material. They had to tweak some details, to adjust to the stream time, but I would say more than anything, Ruth as Claire and Andre as Brian embodied the uneasy personalities of both, because for me, there was something I couldn't put my finger on with Brian, and then Claire, I've already shared my opinions on her, but they both kind of gave me unsettling vibes. And it's not that they're necessarily bad people, but I didn't like how they were reacting to the situation that they were all in. So I think that they really had that down pat in the film. And in my opinion, that was the best part of the film, was just seeing those two characters share the screen. But Tessa Thompson as Irene is fantastic. I love her. So okay, so when it comes to the book, I would say the tension was very thick. You just knew that something was going to happen throughout this book. It kept you in a very, like, you had to keep reading because you knew something was going to happen, because there's no way that there's this much internal conflict that it wouldn't kind of spill over and affect another character. Again, I found Brian and Claire unsettling. And I'm kind of unable to reconcile Irene's decision, but I guess the means justify the end. She wants to remain comfortable and sane, and I get that, but that's not real life. So, but it's also like, girl, can you stand up to Claire and tell her to get out of your house, or like leave you alone or something? It's not even like they had cell phones back then, so she could have just kind of iced her out. I don't know. I wasn't able to wrap my head around why she wouldn't just tell her to go away. But again, that, I guess reinforces the idea that Claire is hard to say no to. But I get exhausted by people easily, so it's not really hard for me. One takeaway here. So, in a way, you're able to choose who you want to be and what you want to do and what you don't. But there are unique consequences that lie on either side of every decision. And so, from Irene one last time, you'll just have to endure some things and give up others. And that's it. So just choose which path you want to go down. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I hope everyone's enjoying the last few days, last few moments of 2021. The next episode will be on the reluctant fundamentalist right here. I'm just about finished with this, and this will be the last episode I record of 2021, so I will be releasing 2 episodes this week. So I hope someone has read this and can give me some feedback on this as well. The reluctant fundamentalist, for those that are just audio listeners. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next episode. Hope everyone has a good break, if they have a break, holiday season or New Year's, all of that. Thank you.